Hilchas Gzeilah V'Aveidah Perik Shnei Moser. Misha Avdo Le'Aveidah Upaga B'Avidosi V'Aveidas Chaveri. So the din is a person is supposed to return, like we learned, there's a chiyuv to return someone's Aveidah. But the chiyuv to return someone's Aveidah is only if it's not at the expense of losing your Aveidah. Mashenkin, if you have your Aveidah, and there's someone else's Aveidah, and returning that person's Aveidah means you're not going to be able to return your Aveidah, so there's no chiyuv. The chiyuv to return someone else's Aveidah is only if it's not at the expense of you losing your Aveidah. But if it's at the expense of losing your Aveidah, so there's no chiyuv to return the other person's Aveidah. That's pashtus of this din. Nochamal, Misha Avda Le'Aveidah, he lost an Aveidah, Upaga B'Avidosi V'Aveidas Chaveri, Im Yochel La'achzer Shneim. So if he can return both of them, is for pashtus Chayim La'achzer Shneim, why not? He has a chiyuv to return the other person's, and he can return his as well. However, his option is only to return one of them. Is avidosi kedamis. Avidosi, it's his money, so he's allowed to return his money to himself. Through that, he's going to not be able to be mazir the aveda of his friend, but he's not mechuyev to be mazir the aveda of his friend if it's at the expense of him losing his aveda. Avidosi kedamis. Vafilo lavedas aviv eishol rabbi. He's not mechuyev to return his father's aveda or his rabbi's aveda if it means the expense of him losing his aveda. Halacha beis. Now, paga b'avedas rabbi and avedas aved. He doesn't have any aveda. There's an avedas rabbi and avedas aved. The question, which one comes first? Is imhoya aviv shokol keneged rabbi? In other words, the father was in the same madrega of a talmud chacham like rabbi. So then the shalom of kedams because he's sai aviv and sai is a talmud chacham. However, v'im lav if the father is not in the madrega of a talmud chacham, is shal rabbi kedams. The rabbi is kedams because he's sai rabbi and sai is not madrega of a talmud chacham. Or Stam is a Talmud Chacham, Pashtus is not Rabbi. So there's no chiyuv. There's Aviv and someone that's a Talmud Chacham, so you have to return Aviv. Mashenker over here, this person has a mile that is Rabbi. As we'll soon learn, Rabbi is Rabbi Muvik. So maybe there's a chiyuv, you have a chiyuv towards him because he's a Rabbi Muvik. On the other end, the father, you also have a chiyuv towards him because he's your father. So the question is, which one is greater? So over here we see, if the Rabbi Muvik is also a Talmud Chacham, which is greater than the father, so then overrides the father. Masha'enkin, if he's not a greater Talmud Chacham, so the fact that he's your father overrides the fact that this person is Rabbi. He says, Nachamal, ve'im lav, if the father is not as great a Talmud Chacham like Rabbi, shal Rabbi kidamis. Now, v'hu she'yir Rabbi Muvik. What does it mean Rabbi Muvik? She'reiv chachmas shel teira mimenu lamed. So a person has a chiyuv towards his father, he has a chiyuv towards the Rabbi. If they're both on the same madrega, so his chiyuv towards Aviv is greater than the chiyuv towards Rabbi. But if the Rabbi is in the greater madrega of a Talmud Chacham, and he's also Rabbi, so then the chiyuv towards Rabbi is greater than the chiyuv towards Aviv. Halacha Gimel. So the din was that if a person sees Avidose and Avedas Chavere, so he has no chiyuv to go ahead and take Avedas Chavere. Fakir, he could go ahead and take his own Aveda and Lepel, so he won't be able to take Avedas Chavere, because he's not mechuyev to take Avedas Chavere at the expense of losing his Aveda. Now, Lepel, if he niach Avidose, v'hirzer Avedas Chaveri, he didn't do what he had a right to do, but he was hiniach Avidose, and Lepel is hirzer Avedas Chaveri, einle eles char haroyle. He only gets, he's not reimbursed for his Aveda, even if his Aveda, let's say, was worth a lot of money, and Lepel, Avedas Chaveri was worth even more money, so he's saying, listen, I lost so much money for Avedas Chaveri, he's not reimbursed. He only gets what a person would normally be paid in order to do what he did. Now, Bechlal, normally for Hashavas Aveda, you don't have to be paid. You can't get paid. In other words, you can't ask for money. If a person finds an Aveda and he returns it, he can't ask money. But over here, since Lepel, by returning this Aveda, he lost his Aveda, so therefore that entitles him to money. But how much money does that entitle him? Only to the money of how much normally a person would hire someone to get this Aveda. Ketzat Shatef Nor Chameirei V'Chamer Chaveri. So the Nor was washing away, sai his chamer, his donkey, and someone else's donkey. And shaloi yofa mana, v'shchaveri masayim. So he niach eshalei v'hitzel l'shchaveri. He goes and leaves off his donkey, and he saves chaveri's donkey. Is ainli el l'schara royla. He can't go ahead into his chaver and say, listen, I lost 100 in order to save yours. You say, Lepel, you weren't taking mechuyev, but Lepel, now that you did it, you can't mon by the chaveri only the schar of how much a person would hire someone to go save his donkey. However, vim amrle, if the person that saw the Aveda and he's in the position to save the Aveda. He turns around to the other person that owns the other Aveda, and he says, I'm going to go and save your donkey, which is worth 200, but I want you to pay me for my donkey that I'm losing, which is worth 100. Oy, is this if he actually, that person was there, so he was able to tell it to him. Oy, or he turned to Bezdin, he tells to Bezdin that you should know I'm going to go be matzal that person's because his is worth more, but only on the condition that I should be able to collect the value of my donkey. So then is chayiv litin lidmei shalei. Then he has a chayiv to be litin lidmei shalei because l'chatchila was done al dazeh that he's going to get reimbursed for his donkey. So that's this din. So the din is normally nachamol. When there's two avedas, and so it's always shaloi kedemis l'shal chaver. He doesn't have to go ahead and be mevater on his in order to save the chavers, even though the chavers is worth more. If Lepel was mevater on his to save the chavers, and the chavers was worth more, he could only mun from the chaver how much a person would normally pay to do this act. Even though normally you can't take money from Meshav Aveda, but over here, since Lepel, he was losing money by the fact that he was being Meshav that person's Aveda, he was being mevater on his Aveda, so therefore he could take the money. However, if he made up either with the owner of that other Aveda or with Bezdin, that he wants to get reimbursed completely for the loss of his item, and that's why he's going ahead and saving that person's item, so then he could take a mun from the other person that he saved his item to completely reimburse him for this item. That's din number one. Then the Rambam concludes, V'afal pi shechameri ola me'elov. So in other words, there was two Avedas. It was his chamer and the other person's chamer. His chamer was worth 100, the other one was worth 200. Now he turns around to the other person and he says, I'm going to save your chamer, and I'll be mevater on my chamer, but I want you to reimburse me 100 for the chamer. And he says, yeah, he's maskim. So now he owes him a chamer for bringing back this chamer. Lepel, he ended up saving his chamer as well, because Lepel's chamer was somehow or another, in an unusual way, it was also nitzel. In other words, the pashtus was that it's not going to be nitzel. But Lepel, his chamer was nitzel. So we don't say since Lepel you ended up with the chamer anyways. L'chura, there's a svara to say that person was only going to reimburse you for your loss. Masha'ekin over here, since you didn't have a loss, so memela there's nothing to reimburse you. So the din is not like that. The din is afal pi shechameri olam me'elav abrahel v'nisasik be'lepel, the person that went ahead and he went and was misasik with the other person's aveda rather than his aveda, and you made up that you're going to pay him for that, the demay of his chamer. So memela zachem mashihisnem imei, you still have to give him that demay of his chamer. So even though he ended up keeping his chamer, but still that was the upmark that he's going to go ahead and save your chamer. He didn't have to. Amanas that you're going to pay him the value of his chamer, so you have to give him the value of his chamer, even if he ends up having his chamer. Halacha dalet. Yored lahatzel v'lehitzel. Lepel, he made up with him that I'm going to go and save your chamer, and Lepel, and you're going to pay me for my chamer. And Lepel, he went down to save the other person's chamer, and he wasn't matzliach. V'lehitzel, he didn't save the other person's chamer. But Lepel, he was mevater on his chamer. So the din is einle el schari haroyle. So then he only gets the schari haroyle, which means how much money someone would pay him to go ahead and be mishtadel in order to save his chamer. Even though Lepel, he wasn't matzliach in saving that person's chamer, but still he's entitled to the schari haroyle. So this is a din when we're talking about a person has his aveda and there's someone else's aveda. Be'etzem, he doesn't have to be mevater on his aveda. But if he was mevater on his aveda, so there's a din. Either he's entitled to schari haroyle, or he's entitled actually to be reimbursed for his aveda. V'chein, so the same din applies. Im hoya oisek b'malach, he was working. Ubitul b'malach te shishava dinner, and he really, with his work, he could have gone and earned a dinner. And lepel v'hir zer aveda shishava meya dinner, and lepel the aveda was worth meya dinner. Is liyemale, he shouldn't say tenly dinner shiv sadati. I lost a dinner in order to save your aveda, which is meya dinner. Say no. Ela noisli schari kepeil bottle she bottle beisim malacha shoyesig ba. In other words, he pays him enachnam. If he would have worked, he would have gotten a dinner. If he would have worked, he would have gotten a dinner. But if someone would have come over to him and says, "What would you be willing to get in order not to work?" In other words, to work, you have to work. How much would you be willing to take in order not to work? So he would take less than a dinner. He would get something without working. So over here also, he didn't work. Lepel, he didn't do the work. He did the Hashavas Aveda, which maybe even harder than his work. But for the Hashavas Aveda, he's not entitled to get paid for. He's only getting paid because Lepel he lost his work. So Memele, so you're only paying for the loss of the work, and the loss of the work you pay him. How much would he be willing to be in a matzah where he doesn't have to work? That's the Havanas Advarim. In other words, you pay him. How much would he be willing? In other words, let's say for an hour he gets a dinner. In Lepel he spent an hour being Meish of the Aveda. So if he would have worked, he would have gotten a dinner. But he would have been willing. If someone would have said, "Listen, I'll give you less than a dinner, but do something and don't work. Don't work. Just stay here and don't work." So he would have been maskim. So therefore, that's the only thing he could be reimbursed for going ahead and being Meish of this Aveda. Let's read it again. He was doing work. He stopped doing his work. Sheshava dinner. V'here's that Aveda sheshava meya dinner. Is lay yemale. So the person that was doing the work that was Meish of the Aveda can't say, "Tell me dinner shivsadati. Give me the whole dinner which I lost." Elanoisli schare kipel bottle. She bottle beis malacha shahi aisig bottle. He gives him his schar like a poil bottle, someone that's a poil, but that's bottle from that malacha there was aisaba. And v'im hisla, but if he made it nayim abaylam, ebifnei bezin sheyitul mashihifsid, just like by the case of the Aveda, if he made it up that he's going to get reimbursed for the whole Aveda, so he has a right to get reimbursed for the whole Aveda. Here also, he could make up with bezin or the baylam sheyitul mashihifsid and vihirshu, and he was marshim. In other words, he said yes. Is that is not natal? V'im ein shom baylam v'lei bezin, and lepel there's no baylam and there's no bezin. So maybe it's a question of either going to head and returning this Aveda which is worth Meya dinner, and he's going to lose out his dinner. He doesn't want to be Mavatar. He doesn't want to be Kapel bottle. He doesn't want to only get Kapel bottle. He wants to get the whole dinner. And Lepel, if he's going to be Mavatar, he'll only get Kapel bottle. He doesn't want to be Mavatar. So and Lepel, he's not going to get more than Kapel bottle. So he has the right to say, so he could continue working whatever his work is, and his Lepel is going to end up having a dinner and not return that other person's Aveda, which is worth Meya dinner. That's this din. So again, the person is not mechuyev to be mavater for the other person's Aveda. He doesn't be mavater in money. If he was mavater in money, so then he's entitled only how much that person, either the case over there was he's entitled kepel bottle, or in the other case he's entitled how much a person was nesan lischar. Halacha v'chein shnayim shoyiboim b'derech. Two people are traveling together. Zeh b'chovis shel yayin v'zeh b'kat shel dvash. They're both holding. He's holding a barrel of wine. He's holding a kad of dvash. And v'nizdak hakat shel dvash. And we're assuming the honey is worth more than the wine. The honey is worth more than the wine. And the kad shel dvash was cracked. Now v'kedim she shafech hadvash la'aretz, before the actual honey spilled out on the earth, on the ground, is shafach zes yein. This person went ahead and spilled out his wine. He was mavater on his wine in order to save that other person's chavis. Is again ainly elis chari haroyle. He lost his wine. We say no. The fact that he lost his wine, you don't have to reimburse him. You only have to reimburse him for what normally you would pay someone in order to go ahead and save your dvash. However, if he said atzil shulucha the same thing, he made up the tonight. I'm going to spill out my wine, but I want you to reimburse me for my wine, and I will save your honey. This is talking about if the dvash was koidim she shafech hadvash loretz. So the dvash wasn't hefker yet. That dvash was still belonging to the original owner, even though it's about to spill out, but he's holding it. So it's not hefker. However, nishpach hadvash loretz, if the dvash was already nishpach loretz, is areza hefker. So at that point in the time it's hefker. So there's no musig of Shavas Aveidah. Shavas Aveidah means the item is yours, but it's about to be lost. Mashenken over here was nishpach hadvash loretz. It's no longer yours. It's areza hefker, and therefore v'chol matzel, whoever's going to go and be matzel, this dvash is la'atzmi matzel. It's not his dvash. So mainly this whole musig of making a deal that you're going to go and pay me for saving this dvash, is the whole idea is not shaykhs, because lepel it's not his dvash. Halacha vov. This person is coming with katshel dvash, and this other person is holding empty jars. And lepel v'nizdeka kadadvash. The kadadvash was cracked. Now the din is that since it's a aveda, it's about to be lost, so there's really a chiyuv on the bal hakankanim to go ahead and help this bal hadvash that his dvash shouldn't get lost. It's a chiyuv in hashavas aveda. Now, Lepel, this Baal Kankanim wants to use the opportunity to make money. V'amali Baal Kankanim Eini matzu l'chodvar zeh b'kankani. I'm not going to go and be matzu, which is really his obligation. Ad shetitin lichetzi yeshlishi yakach v'kach dinin. Because he wants to have a certain percentage of the dvash, or he wants to get paid for this work. And the kivalol of baladvash, the baladvash didn't want to lose his dvash. He says, yeah, fine. He made up. So the din is areza sochik bei. The fact that the baladvash agreed to it doesn't really mean it's not binding. That agreement is not binding. In other words, when are you allowed to take money for doing hashavas aveda if you're about to lose money and lapel you're being mavater on your money in order to get hashavas aveda? You have work to do and lapel you're losing your work, or you have yayin in your cab, you're pouring out the wine, or there's your aveda, you're being mavater on your aveda for his aveda. Over here you have empty jars, so maybe you have a chiyuv of hashavas aveda. So maybe you have no right to really ask for money for this hashavas aveda. So therefore, even though the pale, the Rambam says, "Eina nesle el schori oroyle." The Mefarshim say that it's talking about that these kankanim are normally used to store things. That's the idea that the kankanim are used to store things. And now by putting the devash into the kankanim, so you're not really getting the normal use of the kankanim, so you're losing that use. So it's a zenen of a zechaser. So maybe you're entitled to schori oroyle, what you would normally get paid to use these kankanim, to rent out these kankanim. Masha'inkin, for this idea that you went ahead and made a tanai, you had no right to make this tanai, because you had a chiyuv. In other words, when you have a chiyuv to do something, and now you want to use the opportunity to get money for it, because that person very much needs it, so that deal is not binding. That's the vort. Whereas even though he agreed to it, but Lepel, you didn't really have a right to make the tanai. So therefore, since you didn't have a right to make the tanai, so the deal, the agreement that person had is not binding. V'chein, misha baruch m'beis ha'asurim, v'hoisem ha'beiris lefanav. There's like a boat. There was a boat in order to help him go over the river. V'amalei, and he tells the person that has this boat, this ma'beiris, havireini v'anesin l'cha dinner, and I'll give you a dinner, which is much more than normally you get paid in order to go over the river. V'havirei, and lepel, he took him over the river, is ainli al schari aroyli. He only gets paid the amount that normally a person pays for taking over the river. In other words, a person that's charging someone and he's utilizing an opportunity, that person needs him very much. But lepel, the etzem, there's really has no right to utilize this opportunity because this person needs him at this point in time. And there's a mitzvah to help him to be able to run away from the Beis Asurim. So that chiyuv moment that person agreed to is not a binding chiyuv moment. If this person, the person that had this boat, was someone that was a fish, he would catch fish. Stop catching your fish and take me over. So over here, since Lepel, he's losing by the fact that he's taking him over, and you never know how much the loss is going to be, because Lepel, when you're fishing, you can get a lot of fish. So therefore, he can make up whatever deal he makes up, and Memela, he has to pay that money. The Ram Ma'ara brings from the Prisha that we're dealing with a mabayris, that a person's we're dealing with a boat that a person normally brings over people and they get money. So be'amas, there's a chiyuv, if someone is running away from a Beis Asurim, there's a chiyuv to help him and to save him even bechinam normally. But since this person has this business that he brings over people for a certain amount of pay, so therefore he could charge him that normal pay. In other words, he can't overcharge him. He could only charge him the amount of pay that he would normally take from everyone. But he can't do it for free. In other words, a person that doesn't have this type of a job, and the person has a boat, and someone is running away, and you want to, let's say you have a car. Your person is a regular, he's not a taxi driver. He has a regular car, and then someone is running away from someone that he's a masukin, and he asks him to take him, and he wants to charge him for it. So you can't charge him even like a taxi, because Lepel, you're not a taxi, and you have a chiyuv to go ahead and help this person, the pashtos. Mashenkin, if you're a taxi driver, so now someone runs into a taxi, and he's in a rush to go, so since you realize how much he's in a rush to go, so you want to overcharge him from this taxi, you have no right, but on the other end, from a regular taxi, you're allowed to take it. That would l'chura how this din would be translated into a way that's a pashta din in our world, is this. That you have either a taxi driver or a person that has a car, that's not a taxi. Halacha ches. Shayara shahoyse hileches b'midbar, and v'amad aleh gaisa v'tarfus. You have a caravan of people that are going and in a midbar, and then there's a guy, it's an army that's coming and wants to rob from them all their money. Now, they're in a matzav that they really can't save themselves from this gaius. And one of these people went ahead v'hitzel. So the din is hitzel atzmi, because since they were in a matzav that it was ovut, so they were basically miyayish also bepashtus. They were miyayish from the matzav, and therefore he went ahead and saved this matzav that was ovut, so he saved it latzmi. However, v'michoil and hein la'atzel miyodam. But lepel, they could have all been matzel miyodam. In other words, it wasn't something that he had to do. And lepel v'kodem echad mem mihitzel is aval pisha omer la'atzmi matzel. He's telling no, I'm saving la'atzmi. Even while he's doing it, he's saying la'atzmi matzel. But since he's not, it's not really mukhrach that he should do it. They could do it for themselves. In other words, they're in a position to protect themselves. So therefore, it's a la'atzmi. So again, if we're talking about a situation where there's a shayara and then there's a guy who's aimed al shayara, so if they could never go ahead and be matzah themselves, so he is matzah la'atzmi, he's hitz la'atzmi, even if he didn't say clearly that he's matzah la'atzmi, but he's matzah la'atzmi. And if they could be matzah la'atzmam, so then even if he goes ahead and says, I'm being matzah la'atzmi, it doesn't help. However, halacha tes, hoyu yechelu la'hatzal ha'idei atchak, they were able to be matzah, but not pashtusdik. It was ha'idei atchak, or they would have to string zuchon. So the din is kol ha'matzel matzel emtza. So since it's again possible for them to be matzel, so whoever goes ahead and matzel is matzel be'emtza, like we said in halacha ches. Ella in kein omer latzmeni matzel. Now in halacha ches it wouldn't have helped that he would have said latzmeni matzel. But over here, since he's yochel lahatzel, it's only yochel lahatzel ha'idei atchak. So if he said la'atzmi ani matzel, so then is ariza matzel la'atzmi. Shekiven sheshamu eimer la'atzmi ani matzel, hoyelem litchik atzmo la'atzl. They should have gone ahead. In other words, they heard him saying la'atzmi ani matzel. And v'kiven sheyoshvu v'lehitzilu harei nisyaishim enakel. Is nochamo. If we're dealing with a situation where they could be matzel, it's not ha'idei atchak, so he's always hitzel emtza. If it's a situation where they couldn't be matzel, so it's always hitzel la'atzmi. If it's a situation where they could be matzel ha'idei atchak, it depends. If he said la'atzmi ani matzel, so then he's matzel la'atzmi. But if he didn't say la'atzmi ani matzel, so then the din is he's matzel emtza. Halacha yud. Hoyu shnei shutfim. You have two shutfim that own something, and again, someone's coming to take it away from them. The hitzel echad mem, and one of them was matzel. And we're talking about even in a case where einam yechelum la'atzel. In other words, it's a matzel which bepashtus ein yechelum la'atzel. And lepel is hitzel echad mehem. So since they're shutfim, we assume hitzel emtza. So that's different by a shayara. By a shayara, if we're talking about einam yechelum la'atzel miyodam, and one of them was matzel, so we say the pashtus is that he was matzel atzmi. Mashenkin over here, since they're shutfim, so even if einam yechelum la'atzel, and he was matzel, we assume that it was hitzel emtza. However, vim omer la'atzmi ani matzel, if he said beferish la'atzmi ani matzel, so then hareze cholik mechaveri, then he became separated from his chaver, became oishutif, and therefore v'hitzel la'atzmi. So if it's talking about that einam yechelum la'atzel, so hitzel la'atzmi means it's mamash his. Masha'inkin, if it's talking about that shneim yechelum la'atzel, that each one was able to matzel, so l'chura he was hitzel la'atzmi only his part. But l'chura the chaver's part l'chura since he's yochel la'atzel, so mainly he's not miyayish really. So bepashtam the Mishnah says so the chiyai gavna he'll only get his part. So l'chura not sure what will be this din of ariza cholik mechaver v'hitzel la'atzmi. L'chura if he says that la'atzmi ni matzel and shneim ein yechelum la'atzel, so if they're einam yechelum la'atzel, so then we understand that hariza cholik mechaver v'hitzel the whole thing la'atzmi. But in the tzir, we're saying he's only matzel half of it la'atzmi, so I'm not really sure what does it mean hitzel la'atzmi. Unless you're going to say the pshat is that let's say he was only matzel half. Let's say he was only matzel half. There was shnei shutfim, and he went ahead and it was hitzel. He says la'atzmi ani matzel, and lepel he was only matzel half. So if we're assuming that hitzel emtza, so from the half that he was matzel, he only gets half. Masha'inkin, if we assume that he was ariza cholik mechaveri v'hitzel la'atzmi, so even if he was only matzel half, so he'll get the whole half. That's the chiddush of this word, that he could be cholik mechaveri, and memela what he's being matzel is only la'atzmi. V'chein ha'seicher es ha'poel la'atzel. A person goes ahead and hires someone la'atzel, is kol sheyatzel harei l'masker, because lepel that was the deal he made up with him that he should be matzel. V'im omar la'atzmani matzel. If he went ahead, in other words, after you hired him, he said no la'atzmani matzel. Is ariza chez ben aschirus. A pale is yochel lauzbe. I feel b'chatzi ayem. A pale could always change his mind from being a pale. Memele v'chol sheyatzel acher she'omer came is areu shalei. That's the thing again. If a person that is mitzias on the yam, and you go hire someone to pick up these mitzias, so that person goes and picks up the mitzias as a pale. So the Metzias are yours. Mashenkin, if the person says, no, la'atzmi ani matzil, so even though you hired him, but he could change his mind and say, now I'm becoming uispoil, I'm becoming uisacher, memela, from now on I'm working for myself. Halacha Yud Aleph, Shayara shechonsa b'midbar, v'amad oleh gayis l'torfa, and lepeil u'posku magayis moment v'nosnule. They made up with the guys to leave them alone, and they gave them money. The question is, how did you divide the money amongst the people of the Shayara? How much does each one have to pay for that money? So the din is mechashvan lefi momenam, they mechashvan lefi nefashos. In other words, your mechashav knows how much money each person had over there, and that's how you divide the money. So if let's say you have three people, and one person had $100 worth, and the other one had $200 worth, and the other one had $300 worth, and you went ahead and you gave this person, you gave these people that came to take away from the Shayara money, so you divide it accordingly. You don't say each one pays a third. Each one pays according to, you take the 100 and the 200 and the 300, and you put it together, and mainly each one, so that's together 600. So one gives 1/6, the other one gives a third, and the other one gives a half. The imsachru tayar lifneim lehidim aderech. If they hired someone to be like a guide for the people in the midbar, so then mechashvan schari lefi mom and ulefi nefashos. So then you divide it according to both. In other words, whatever the money you give him, you divide half of it. You say half of it is divided according to the nefashos. So each one has to pay the same percentage of that half. In other words, according to how many people there are, regardless of how much money each person has in the shayara. And the other half is divided according to the amount of money that the person has in the shayara. Halacha Yud Beis. Rashoim Machamorim Lahasnis B'neim. There's donkey drivers that have donkeys and they're all driving together. They make it nice. Shekol Mi Shetevid Menu Chamer B'Bnei HaShayara. If anyone loses a chamer, is Mamid Le Chamer Acheres. So the other people of the shayara will reimburse him for that chamer. That's talking about if Stamaz he acted regularly. However, in Posho Bohu for Avda, if he acted with negligence and Memela was Avda, so then in Chayam Lamed Bey. Whereas we name on that the pashtus of the Upmach was only if he's not Pesheah, Masheni if he's Pesheah, so then that's not the Upmach. Halacha Yud Gimel. Now of the Chameri, Lepel he lost his Chamer, V'amar Tnuli Domer, Ve'eni Reitzulika Chamer. No, we made up that you're going to reimburse me the Chamer. I want you to reimburse me the money of the chamer. I don't want to buy another chamer. I'm going to be together with you. I'm going to be together with you and watch everything. But I don't want to have that chamer that I lost. I'd rather have the money of the chamer. So the din is ein shemalei. Notice the deal was that we were going to reimburse you a chamer. So we don't listen to him to get the money for the chamer. Why? We want everyone to participate in watching the shayara. So mainly the fact that this person will have a chamer there, that'll encourage him to go ahead and be extra careful and be watching the shayara. I'm anyways careful because they have another behemah with the shayara. So when a person has two behemoths in the shayara, so he'll be even more careful. So therefore we insist that the deal is that you be reimbursed the chamer, not the money for the chamer. Halacha Yudalet. Svina shoisim haleches b'yam. You have a ship that's going in the ocean. V'amad aleh nachshel l'tova. Like a very strong storm or a whirlpool that was going to go and sink the ship. And v'hikilu masos. So now they're throwing off things from the ship in order for it to be lighter. Now you have one person that has 100 kikar of zav, and the other person has 100 kikar of barzel, and one of them threw off 10 kikar of zav. Now the question is, the 10 kikar of zav is worth more than the older barzel. So the question is, how much does the one of the barzel have to throw off? So we say that each one, or al would be lesi fakert, the one that the barzel threw off first, and now how much does the person with the kikar zav to throw off? So he has to throw off an equal amount of weight. And it's not again, this weight is worth much more money than the other weight. But the problem over here is the overweight of this ship. That's what they're concerned about. So mainly you're trying to offload the weight. So mainly to get rid of the stuff on the ship, each person has to give lefimasi according to the weight. It makes no difference how much the weight is worth. Each person, let's say you make up that each person is going to throw off a tenth of the weight of the items that he has. This person's the tenth of the weight is worth a lot of money. The other person, a tenth of the weight is worth not so much money, but it's not again. But you shouldn't change from the minig of the people that of the sailors. Halakha Tezvav. Rashoina saponim lahasnis b'neim, that called mi shetevet l'svina is mamin l'svina acheres. Also the people that are the sailors that are fearing ships in the ocean, so they make up that whoever loses a ship, so we will reimburse him for that ship. Now Pasha B'Aveidah, if Lepeil, it was a pshia, the person that lost the ship was because of a pshia, or he went to a place where that's not where the sfinas are normally going, so mainly he did something different than the regular way, so then the din is ein chayav lamed bein. The deal was only if he's going to act regularly, he's going to be careful, he's going to go together with everybody in the place where everybody goes, so then they will reimburse him if he loses a ship. Masha'inkin, if he deviates from the normal path, or he goes from a different path, or he does something which is a pshia, so then we naman that wasn't the deal, and they have no chiyuv to reimburse him.